she told them at the dinner table, still in her maid's uniform, and she didn't take it back. Molly Davidson is 29, black, beautiful, and every day she buttons the same black and white maid uniform to clean a mansion that isn't hers. The man she loves runs it. Kang Min-jae, a Korean Mafia boss they call the Quiet One. A coiled dragon inked up the right side of his neck, a platinum watch on his wrist, and a stillness that makes powerful men lower their voices. At the Davidson family dinner, Molly says his name out loud. Her stepmother Diane laughs into her pearls. Her stepsister Vivian says it's impossible. Her father stares at his plate and says nothing. Molly doesn't flinch. Min-jae gives her a rare day off. One ordinary afternoon by the pool, no uniform, just two people laughing. He says he's tired of keeping her a secret. Then night falls, and Diane calls Molly into the room with a cold, simple order. Break it off. Hand him to Vivian, the suitable daughter. But what Molly said next, and what the quiet man had already decided in silence. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. The fork stopped halfway to Diane's mouth. Molly had just said it, quietly, between the roast and the water pitcher, the way you say something you have practiced in the shower for 2 weeks. I'm seeing someone. She kept her hands in her lap. She kept her back straight. The dining room held 4 other people, and none of them looked up right away, which was worse than if they had. Then Vivian laughed through her nose. Seeing who? The bus driver? The candles were lit for no one. Diane lit them every Sunday whether there was a reason or not. 4 tapers in silver holders that had belonged to Walter's mother, and Molly had spent enough Sundays at this table to know the candles were not warmth. They were staging. The good china came out for an audience of 5, and the audience was really an audience of 1, Diane, watching herself be the woman who kept a proper house. Molly had noticed years ago that she noticed things like this. It was a habit that did not switch off when she left work. Molly set her water glass down without a sound. She was still in her uniform. She had come straight from the estate, black dress and white apron, the wide straps pressing at her shoulders, because there had been no time to change, and because changing would have meant driving to her apartment first, and she would have talked herself out of coming at all. So she sat at the Davidson table in the clothes she cleaned other people's houses in, and she said the second sentence, the one that mattered. His name is Kang Min-jae. Diane finished the bite. She chewed. She dabbed the corner of her mouth with the linen napkin, folded it into a triangle, and laid it beside her plate. Every motion took a second longer than it needed to. Kang, she said. That's Korean. Yes. And where did you meet a Korean man, Molly? The question had a floor under it, and the floor was a trapdoor. Molly felt it open. At work. At work. Diane's pale eyes moved to the apron and back up. You mean you clean his house? Walter reached for the bread. He did not butter it. He held the knife over the dish and then set the knife down again, and his eyes went to his plate and stayed there, behind the rimless glasses, on a slice of roast he was not going to eat. I manage his house, Molly said. I've worked for him 4 years. 4 years? Vivian had turned in her chair to face her stepsister fully now. One honey blonde wave pushed behind an ear, elbow on the table. She was enjoying this. She had the look she got at department stores when a sale item turned out to be worth more than the tag. 4 years, and now he's your boyfriend. That's very Cinderella. I didn't say boyfriend. You said seeing someone. I did. So which is it? Molly held her gaze. Something in her ribs was beating too fast, and she was determined it would not reach her face. Boyfriend, she said. Yes. The word sat on the table like a dropped dish. Nobody moved to clean it up. Diane laughed then. Not loud, a short, low sound. 3 notes, the kind of laugh that is really a door closing. She picked up her wine glass by the stem and rolled it a quarter turn, watching the wine climb and settle. "Molly," she said, in the voice she used for explaining things to people she thought were slow. "Men like that don't date the help. They keep the help. There's a difference, and you're old enough to know it. He asked me to dinner, twice. I said yes the second time. Of course he did." "What does that mean?" "It means," Diane said, "that a man who owns a house that size can ask anyone in the world to dinner, and if he's asking the woman who scrubs his floors, then either he's bored or he's cruel, and neither one ends with you at a wedding. I'm saying this because no one else at this table will." Walter's shoulders came up half an inch. That was all. He had a way of almost speaking that used his whole body and produced no sound, and Molly had watched it her entire adult life, at parent conferences, at her mother's funeral, at every table where Diane held the knife. His mouth opened, his hand turned on the tablecloth, palm up, an old gesture, the beginning of a defense. Then Diane set her wineglass down with a small click, and his hand closed, and the moment folded shut like it had never started. Molly saw all of it. She would not look away from her father, and he would not look up at her, and that was the whole of their relationship in one held breath. "Dad," she said. He reached for the water this time, poured. The pitcher shook, a little, and a drop hit the cloth and spread into a gray coin. "Do you have anything to say?" "Your stepmother knows more about these things than I do," Walter said to the water. He had been a professor once, before Molly's time, a man who stood in front of rooms and was listened to. She had seen the photograph, back when the photograph still hung in the hall. Somewhere between that man and this one at the table, the listening had stopped, and he had traded it for quiet, and the quiet had become the only thing he knew how to give anyone. He gave it to her now, generously, a whole plate of it. There it was. Molly felt it land somewhere under the sternum, a familiar weight, worn smooth from handling. She had brought it up anyway. She had rehearsed the sentence in the shower, knowing this room, knowing this exact silence, and she had come and set it into the silence on purpose, because she was done letting the silence decide what was true. Vivian speared a piece of roast and chewed it slowly, watching. "What's he like?" she asked, and the question was not kind. It had a hook in it. "You're Mr. Kang. Is he old? Fat? There's got to be a catch. Rich men who chase maids usually have a catch. He's 36. And handsome?" "Yes." Vivian's chewing slowed. Molly saw the recalculation happen behind the wide hazel eyes, saw the sale tag being reread. "How rich?" Vivian said, not quite a question. "I don't ask him that." "But you know, you clean the house, you see the cars." Vivian leaned in. "How rich, Molly? It's not your business how rich. It's a little bit my business." Vivian smiled. "We're family." The word landed and did nothing. Family. Molly turned it over and set it back down. She had learned what the word meant in this house at 11 years old, 6 months after her mother died, and Walter married the woman across the table, when Diane had rearranged the pantry, and the photographs, and the seating, and, quietly, the rules. Molly got a smaller room. Vivian, 3 years younger, got the tutor and the piano and the summer camps. Molly got told she was lucky. She had said it to herself so many times as a girl that she'd almost believed it, standing in the smaller room, folding her own laundry, listening to the piano through the wall. She'd gotten good at folding. She'd gotten good at rooms that weren't hers. 4 years of managing a stranger's enormous house had been, in a way she never said out loud, the easiest work she'd ever done, because at least there she was paid for it. "Right," Molly said. "Family." Diane cut across it, smooth. "This is exactly the fantasy I'm trying to spare you," she said, turning back to Molly, warming to the role, the reasonable one, the only adult. "You've built a whole story. Handsome, young, wealthy, and he chose you. Do you hear how that sounds? Do you hear it from the outside? She spread her fingers on the tablecloth. Her pearls sat perfect against the dove-gray cashmere. Men like that have women flown to them. Women who model. Women who speak 3 languages and were raised knowing which fork to use. And you want me to believe he looked at the girl in the apron and thought, her, that one, I'll build my life around her. Molly listened to all of it without moving. She had heard versions of this speech her whole life, the one about knowing which fork to use, the one about the kind of woman a certain kind of man deserved, always delivered as concern, always with the pearls sitting perfect on the cashmere. She used to argue. In her 20s she had argued, loud, until her voice cracked, and Diane's face went smooth and pleased, because a cracked voice proved the point. She did not argue now. She had learned that the smooth, pleased face was the win Diane was fishing for, and she had stopped baiting the hook. She kept her hands folded. She kept her breathing even. On the inside of her wrist, hidden under the table, she pressed her thumbnail into the pad of her thumb, once, hard, an old trick, a way to keep the water out of her eyes. I didn't ask you to believe anything, Molly said. I told you because you're my family and I wanted you to hear it from me. Then hear this from me. It's going to end, and it's going to end badly, and when it does, you'll have thrown away 4 years of steady employment because you couldn't tell a paycheck from a proposal. The room was quiet. In the kitchen, a faucet ran and shut off. Somebody's phone buzzed against wood, once, and no one reached for it. Molly looked around the table. At Diane, upright and composed, the pale eyes cool and patient, certain she was being kind. At Vivian, recalculating, the hook still out, wondering now if there was something here worth taking. At her father, who had picked up his fork and was moving food from one side of the plate to the other, the picture of a man very busy with his dinner, a man who had said the only thing he was ever going to say. 4 years. She thought about the 4 years. Not the way Diane meant them. She thought about the first month in that enormous quiet house, learning where the light switches were, learning that the man who owned it came home at strange hours and sat alone in a room the size of her whole apartment and asked her, once, whether she'd eaten. She thought about the second year, when she had noticed things while she worked. A name spoken twice on a phone call through a cracked door, a folder left on a desk, a man who came to the house smiling and left having taken something, and she had said, quietly, passing Min-jae in the hall with an armful of linens, I wouldn't trust the one who smiles too much. She thought about the way he had stopped walking. She did not say any of that here. It was not theirs. You've gone quiet, Diane observed. Good. Think about it. I'm not taking it back, Molly said. Diane's brow moved, 1 small millimeter. I beg your pardon? Whatever you're waiting for me to say, I'm not saying it. I came here to tell you I'm with him. I've told you, I'm not going to sit here and let you talk me out of it, so we can all pretend I never said it. For the first time all evening, Diane was quiet for a beat she had not chosen. Vivian filled it. God, she's serious, she said, and it came out almost admiring, which was its own kind of insult. You're actually serious about this man. I am. Then bring him. Vivian sat back, arms crossed, a smile spreading that had teeth in it. New Year's. We do the party every year. You know that. Bring your Mr. Kang. Let's all meet him. Let's see this man who built his life around the girl in the apron. She flicked her eyes down the length of Molly's uniform and back up, slow, and let the silence do the rest. Something crossed Diane's face. Not agreement, calculation, the same look Vivian had worn a moment ago, mother and daughter running the same math. If the man was real, if the man was rich, if the man was handsome and 36, and owned the cars Molly wouldn't describe, then there were arrangements to consider, that had nothing to do with sparing Molly anything. "Yes," Diane said slowly. "Bring him." Molly heard the shift. She was not a stupid woman. She had spent 4 years in the houses of people who thought staff had no ears, and she knew the sound of a room recalculating around money. An hour ago they had laughed at the bus driver. Now they wanted to meet him. The wound of it was old and specific. She had grown up in this house being weighed, being found light, and being weighed again the instant she looked like she might be worth something. She knew exactly what she was to them, and she had known it a long time. She stood up. The chair legs dragged on the floor, and the sound was loud in the quiet. She smoothed the apron down over the black dress, an automatic motion, 4 years deep, and she saw Diane's eyes track the gesture and file it away as proof of everything she'd said. "Sit down, Molly. We haven't had dessert." "I have an early morning." "Cleaning his house," Vivian said sweetly. "Managing his house." She picked up her small clutch from beside the plate. Her hands were steady now. The fast thing in her ribs had gone still somewhere in the last 2 minutes, the way it always did once the worst of a thing was already out in the open and could not be worse. "Thank you for dinner." Walter looked up then. Finally, his sad gray-brown eyes found her over the rimless glasses, and there was something in them, some struggle, some almost. "Molly," he said. "Sweetheart." She waited. She gave him the whole length of the room to say the next thing. He said, "Drive safe. It's dark." She nodded once. She had gotten exactly what she came expecting, which is a mercy of a kind, the not being surprised. "Good night, Dad." She walked out through the front hall, past the framed photographs on the wall that had been rearranged years ago so that her mother no longer appeared in any of them, past the coat closet, out the heavy front door into the cold. She did not slam it. Slamming it would have told them they'd reached her. On the front step, she stopped and breathed. The Davidson house glowed behind her, warm windows, dinner still on the table, 3 people already talking about her, in a lower voice than they'd used to her face. She could feel it happening at her back like heat from a stove. Her phone was in the clutch. She took it out. One text, waiting, sent 40 minutes ago while she'd been rehearsing courage over roast beef. From Min Jae. She had a name for him in her phone that no one at that table would ever guess, and under it 3 words, no punctuation, the way he wrote everything, spare, like he was paying by the letter. "Did you tell them?" She stood on the cold step in her apron and looked at the 3 words for a long moment. Behind her, muffled through the door, Vivian's laugh went up again, bright and pleased, the sound of a plan being made. Molly's thumb moved over the glass. "I told them everything." She sent it. Then she went down the steps toward her car, and she did not look back at the windows, and for the first time in her life she had said a true thing at that table, and left it standing on the table behind her, undefended and unretracted, hers. The gate at the estate opened before Molly reached it. Someone inside had been watching the road. She drove up the long curve of pale gravel and parked where she always parked, in the same spot she used every morning she came here to work, and the habit of it steadied her hands. The house rose ahead, low and wide and dark, except for one window on the ground floor. The kitchen. He was in the kitchen. She sat in the car a moment, then she went in. Min Jae stood at the counter with his back to the door, sleeves pushed to the forearm, a kettle just beginning to complain on the stove. He didn't turn when the door opened. He knew her step by now, 4 years of it across these floors. "You ate?" he said. "At the table. Some of it." He took a second cup from the shelf without being asked. That was the answer to whether she was staying. He set it beside his own and poured, and the steam climbed between them, and for a moment neither of them filled the quiet with anything. "They laughed," she said. "I know." He slid the cup toward her. "You told me. You told them everything." She wrapped both hands around the warmth. The dragon on his neck showed at the open collar, dark against his skin, and she looked at it the way you look at a thing you have stopped seeing because it is always there. He watched her over the rim of his cup, calm, unblinking, the way he watched most things. Vivian wants you to come to the party, she said. New Year's, she said, bring him. Something moved at the corner of his mouth, not a smile, the place a smile starts. After they laughed, after they found out how old you are and what the house is worth, she set the cup down. The second they smelled money, the laughing stopped. He nodded slowly, like a man confirming a figure he had already suspected. He did not seem hurt by it. He seemed, if anything, faintly satisfied, the way he got when a thing behaved exactly as he had predicted it would behave. You're tired, he said. I'm fine. You held your face together for 2 hours in a room that wanted you smaller. You're tired. He took her cup, still half full, and set it in the sink. Go up. The blue room. Don't argue with me about the maid's quarters tonight. I'm not in the mood to lose. She almost argued anyway. Habit again. But her shoulders had already dropped, and he had already turned off the stove, and the house around her was quiet in a way the Davidson house never was, and she let it win. She slept 9 hours. She had not slept 9 hours in years. When she came down, the light was already high and gold across the kitchen floor, and Min-jae was sitting at the long table with 2 phones face down in front of him and a third turned off entirely. He pushed a plate toward the chair across from him. Eggs, rice, something with sesame he'd clearly made himself, badly, with love. Sit, he said. You're not working today. She stayed standing. There's the West Hall. The windows haven't been done since. You're not working today, he said again, and this time he said it the way he said things to men who worked for him, the flat, quiet version, the one that ended conversations. Then his voice softened back down. Sit, eat the eggs. They're terrible. I made them myself. She sat. She ate the eggs. They were terrible. She told him so, and he laughed. One short, surprised sound, and she felt it land somewhere under her ribs and stay there. A day off, she said. You've never given me a day off. I've given you plenty. You've given me days I didn't have to clean. That's not the same thing. She pointed the fork at him. On those days I still counted the linens and reordered the pantry, and once I reorganized your entire study while you were in Seoul. That was you? Everything was in the wrong drawer. It offended me. I couldn't find my own passport for a week. It was under P. He looked at her for a long moment. The morning light caught the amber in her eyes, and he seemed to lose his place in whatever he'd been about to say. Then he stood and held out his hand across the table, palm up, the way a man does when he has decided something. Come outside, he said. It's warm for once. We'll sit by the water and do nothing, and you'll hate it for an hour, and then you'll like it. They went out to the pool. She had cleaned the tiles around it 100 times on her knees and had never once sat at its edge, and now she took off her shoes and put her feet in the cold blue of it, and something in her chest unlocked a notch she hadn't known was locked. He sat beside her, close, his shoulder near hers, and rolled his trousers to the shin like a boy, and for a while they did exactly what he'd promised. Nothing. The water threw light up under his jaw. A bird went across the far end of the garden and came back. You never ask me for anything, he said, after a while. I ask you for the good vinegar. You keep buying the cheap one. I mean it. He wasn't smiling now. 4 years. You've watched money move through this house that would frighten most men. You've watched people come to this door and leave without their confidence, and you've never once asked me for a thing that was for you. She looked at the water. It's your house. It's my house. He picked up a fallen leaf from the tile and turned it in his fingers. 2 years ago, you stopped me in the hall. You had a rag in your hand and dust on your knee, and you told me not to trust the one who smiles too much. Molly went still. I almost didn't stop walking, he said. I did stop. You remember that. I stood there in the hall like a fool while a woman with a rag told me my accountant was smiling too much. He let the leaf fall to the surface of the pool and they both watched it turn. 3 weeks later, I found where the money was going. You saved me more that afternoon than most of the men I pay to save me. I just noticed things, she said. When you clean a house, you see who's nervous in it, who won't meet your eyes, who talks too fast in a room they think is empty, because the girl with the mop doesn't count. She turned her foot in the water. People say everything in front of a maid. She's furniture. You were never furniture in this house. I know that now. You knew it then, he said. You just didn't believe I knew it. She had no answer for that, so she gave him the truth instead. There was a man last spring. The one with the gold watch came 3 times. He kept looking at your study door when he thought no one saw. On the 3rd visit, I moved a chair so he couldn't stand where he liked to stand, and I watched his hands. She shrugged. His hands didn't match his mouth. I left you a note. The note under the desk lamp. Under the lamp. I moved a meeting because of that note. The meeting was a trap. He said it plainly, the way he said everything. A fact set on the table between them. You've done that 6 times, Molly. 6 times in 4 years you've seen a thing my own people missed. I keep count. The number sat there in the sun. 6 times. She had not been counting. She had only been cleaning and looking, because looking was the one thing no one had ever managed to take from her. He turned to face her fully then, one knee up on the warm tile. I'm tired, he said, of keeping you a secret. She looked at him. Not tired of you, tired of the size of you being a thing I hide. His voice stayed low and even, but there was something under it now, something that had been waiting a while for the right morning. You come in the back, you leave before the men arrive. When people ask who runs the house, I say a woman, and I let them imagine some gray old thing with keys on a chain. And you let me do it. You've let me do it for a year, because you decided somewhere in your own head that being kept quiet was the most a woman like you was allowed. Min Jae, I'm not asking you to fix it today. I'm telling you I'm done with it. He picked her hand up off the tile and held it, and his hand was warm and dry and certain around hers. You told them at that table, in front of the ones who've spent 17 years making you small. You said my name and you didn't take it back. You heard about the taking it back part. You texted me. I told them everything. A muscle moved in his jaw. Do you know what I did when I read that? I stood in this garden in the dark and I was proud of you in a way I didn't have a word for. In Korean or English. I've been trying to find the word since last night. She laughed, wet, surprised. You've been out here all night, looking for a word? Some of the night. He almost smiled. The rest of it I spent deciding I would never let you go in through the back door again. The sun was full on them now. Somewhere in the house, one of the face-down phones buzzed against the table and he ignored it. And that alone told her more than the whole speech had, because Min Jae did not ignore phones. Men who ignored phones in his world ended up dead in ditches, and he'd told her that himself, once, at 3 in the morning, and here he was, letting one buzz itself to silence, with his eyes on her face. They stayed by the water until the light changed. She made him laugh twice more, once about the eggs again, and once about a thing his own bodyguard had said the week before, and each time it happened, his whole face reorganized itself into something younger, and she thought, no one else gets to see this. Not Diane, not Vivian, not the men with the gold watches. This is mine. Then, out loud, because the morning had made her brave, the party. Do you actually want to come? He didn't answer right away. He looked out over the garden, at the wall, at the road beyond it, she could not see. You spent 17 years in that house being told what you were, he said. I'd like to be in the room the night that stops being true. It might not stop. They might just be cruel with better manners. Then I'll be in the room for that too. He stood, and pulled her up by the hand he was still holding, and the two of them stood at the edge of the water in the high, clean light. But I don't think it'll go how they think it will. They've planned a party for a man who's coming to be inspected. Something cool passed behind his calm eyes. There and gone. I'm not coming to be inspected. What are you coming to be? He looked at her for a long moment, and whatever he decided to keep it a little longer. Hungry, he said instead. Come inside, I'll make you something that isn't eggs. She let him lead her back across the tile, her shoes in her free hand, and for one whole afternoon, the Davidson table, and its 4 silver candles, and its practiced small cruelties, did not exist. He cooked, badly. She fixed it, quietly, the way she fixed everything, and he let her, and they ate standing up at the counter, because neither of them wanted to sit far apart at the long table. After they ate, he found a deck of cards in a drawer and taught her a Korean game with rules he clearly invented as he lost. She caught him cheating twice. The second time she reached across and turned his hand over on the counter, and there were 2 cards palmed against the inside of his wrist, and she raised one eyebrow, and the boss of a thing men feared across 2 continents had the grace to look caught. That's not a real rule, she said. It's a regional variation. From what region? This one. He gestured at the whole kitchen. Very local, very small region. You wouldn't know it. She laughed until her eyes watered, and he watched her do it with the quiet greed of a man who had gone a long time without hearing that particular sound in his own house. When she caught her breath, she found him not laughing at all anymore, just looking, and the looking changed the temperature of the room, and she busied her hands with the cards so she wouldn't have to decide what to do with her face. You do that a lot, she said. The looking. You're worth looking at. I'm in my off-day clothes. I look like someone who fell asleep on a bus. You look, he said, like the one thing in this house I actually chose. He gathered the cards back into a stack and squared the edges against the counter, slow, and she recognized the gesture because she did it herself with linens, the hands finding order, while the mouth said something the hands were afraid of. Everything else here came with the house or came with the work. Men I inherited, rooms someone else decorated. You walked in the back door 4 years ago with a reference letter and a bad umbrella, and you're the only thing under this roof I'd fight to keep. She set her half of the cards down very carefully. The umbrella wasn't bad. It was broken. There's a difference. There's no difference. There's every difference, she said, and her voice had gone thick, and she cleared it. One's a thing you buy cheap. The other's a thing that used to work and got treated wrong. He heard the second meaning under the first. She watched him hear it. He didn't reach for her and he didn't say anything soft, which was somehow better, because he simply nodded once, like a man filing a fact he did not intend to forget, and then he put the kettle back on, so the moment had somewhere to go. The afternoon stretched long and easy. She reorganized his spice shelf without being asked, and he protested and let her. He showed her a photograph on his phone of a mountain outside Busan, where he'd grown up, and she asked him 3 questions about it, and he answered all 3, which she would learn later was 2 more than he answered most people about anything. Outside, the light went from gold to amber to the flat blue that comes before evening. At 4, he got a call he did take. He stepped into the hall and spoke in Korean, low and short, and she watched the line of his back through the doorway and saw it change, the shoulders squaring, the voice dropping into the register she wasn't part of. When he came back, his face had closed a degree. I have to be somewhere tonight, he said. Not long. Stay here. Sleep in the blue room again. Don't drive back to that house in the dark. But she was already reaching for her shoes. I should go home. Molly. Not to stay. To get my things. I left everything there. The whole week's clothes. My mother's ring. She stopped. Her mother's ring was in a drawer in the small room that had once been a bigger room, and the thought of it sitting in that house without her tonight made her stomach turn. I'll get my things and come back. An hour. He didn't like it. She saw him not like it. But he had spent the whole day telling her she was nobody's furniture, and a man cannot say that in the morning, and forbid a woman her own front door by night, and he knew it. An hour, he said. You text me when you're leaving that house. I'll text you. He walked her to the car himself, not the back way, out the front, across the pale gravel in the last of the gold light. He opened her door. Before she got in, he put his hand against the side of her face, once, and said something in Korean she didn't understand, and didn't ask him to translate, because some things you keep untranslated on purpose so they stay entirely yours. Then she drove back to the Davidson house to collect a week of clothes and her mother's ring. The kitchen light was on when she pulled up, all of them still awake, and through the front window, before she even cut the engine, she could see Diane standing in the center of the living room, with her arms folded and her chin level, waiting, the way a woman waits when she has spent the whole day sharpening exactly what she means to say. Molly took the ring first. She went in through the side door, the one that opened on the laundry hall, and she went up the back stairs before anyone could put a hand on her arm. The small room was at the end of the corridor, past the linen closet, past the door that used to be hers and now held Diane's off-season coats. She opened the third drawer of the dresser. The ring was where she had left it, in a folded square of tissue at the back, behind the winter gloves nobody wore. She held it in her palm for a moment, then she closed her fingers. Downstairs, the house had gone quiet, in a way that houses don't when they are empty. It was the quiet of people waiting to be heard. Molly filled a canvas bag with a week of clothes, folded flat, no wasted motion, the way she folded everything. She zipped it. She put the ring in the inside pocket, the one with the button, and she pressed the button twice to be sure. When she came down the front stairs, Diane was still standing in the center of the living room. She had not moved from the spot Molly had seen through the window, arms folded, chin level, the pearls catching the lamp. Behind her, on the sofa, Vivian sat with her legs tucked under her and her phone face down on the cushion. Walter was in the armchair by the cold fireplace, hands on his knees, looking at a spot on the rug. "Sit down," Diane said. "I'm not staying." "Sit down anyway." Molly set the bag by the door. She did not sit. She stood beside it, one hand still on the strap, and that small distance between her and the furniture was its own answer. Diane looked at the bag. "You packed." "I did." "For how long?" "I didn't count the days." The corner of Diane's mouth moved, not a smile, a measurement. She uncrossed her arms and crossed them the other way, and Molly had watched this woman for 18 years and knew the gesture meant she had decided to begin. "I spent today thinking about you," Diane said. "That's rare. You'll admit that's rare." "I'll admit it. Don't be clever. It doesn't fit you." Diane took a step, unhurried, toward the fireplace, toward Walter, and stopped where the lamplight was best. "I thought about the position you've put this family in. You come to my table in your work clothes and you announce, in front of your father, that you're being kept by a Korean businessman, 36 years old, and you expect us to pour the wine and say how nice. He's not keeping me. He owns the house you scrub. He owns a lot of houses." Vivian laughed once, short, through her nose. Diane lifted one finger without turning, and the laugh stopped. "Here is what I know," Diane said. "I made 2 calls today. I have friends who know how to look at a man. Kang Min-jae is not a small thing. He is not a landlord with a temper. He moves money that most people never see move, and he has kept himself clean enough that no photograph exists of him doing anything but eating lunch." She let that sit. A man like that does not marry the woman who dusts his shelves. He entertains her, and when he's done being entertained, he writes a reference and sends her home in a taxi. Molly's grip on the strap did not change. "You called people about him. I protect this family. You priced him. I informed myself. Diane's eyes were very pale in the lamp. And what I learned is that this is an opportunity, and you are about to waste it out of pride. The word opportunity landed in the room and changed the air. Walter's head came up an inch. Vivian's hand found her phone again and turned it over, screen dark, and held it. Molly felt the shape of what was coming before it arrived. She had cleaned 100 rooms after they were used. She knew when something had already been decided by everyone but her. Say it plainly, Molly said. You've never had trouble. Diane walked to the sofa. She sat down beside Vivian, close, and put one hand flat on her daughter's knee, and the picture composed itself the way portraits do, the mother and the pretty daughter, the pearls and the honey-blonde waves, arranged for viewing. You're going to end it, Diane said. The refrigerator hummed in the next room. Somewhere a clock moved. You're going to end it, Diane said again, and her voice stayed level and warm, which was worse than shouting. And you're going to introduce him to Vivian. Properly, not as a rival, as a favor. You tell him the truth, that the woman who's been keeping his floors clean isn't what a man in his position should be seen with, and that there's a daughter in this family who was raised for exactly this, who speaks well, who photographs, who won't embarrass him at a table. Molly did not answer. The not answering was the only thing she trusted herself to do. Look at her, Diane said, and squeezed Vivian's knee. Look at what he'd be getting, and look at what he has. She let her eyes travel over Molly, the flat shoes, the plain sweater she'd changed into that morning at the estate, the canvas bag. Be honest with yourself for 1 minute in your life. Which one of you was built for that room? Vivian did not look at Molly. She looked at the dark screen of her phone, and there was color rising along her jaw, and Molly understood in that second that Vivian had not known the plan would be said out loud, that Vivian had wanted the man, but not the naming of the trade. You want me, Molly said slowly, to hand him over. I want you to be useful to this family instead of a liability, like a set of keys. Don't be dramatic. You want me to walk into his house, where I have worked for 4 years, and tell him he should take my stepsister instead of me. I want you to be realistic about who ends up in that house, Diane said, because it will not be you. It was never going to be you. The only question is whether this family gets anything out of it, or whether you burn the whole thing down for the pleasure of feeling wronged. Walter shifted in the armchair. The leather creaked. He opened his mouth, and for a moment his eyes went to Molly, and there was something in them, some old and buried thing trying to surface. His hand lifted an inch off his knee. Walter, Diane said, without looking at him. His hand came back down. Molly saw it. She had seen it 100 times, and she saw it again, and it still did something to the back of her throat. But she kept her eyes on Diane, because Diane was the one talking, and she had learned long ago that you watch the one who is talking. You've thought about this all day, Molly said. I have. You've thought about his money all day. I've thought about your future, Diane said, and your sister's, and what this family looks like from the outside, which you have never once cared about, because you were raised by a woman who thought love was enough. The pale eyes did not blink. It isn't. I'm the proof of that. Your mother is the proof of that. The room tilted very slightly. Molly's hand tightened on the strap until the canvas bit her palm, and she was glad of the bag, glad of something to hold, because the ring was inside it, and the ring was her mother's, and Diane had just used her mother as a knife. Don't, Molly said. It came out low. Don't what? Don't tell the truth? Don't talk about her. I'll talk about whatever serves this conversation. Diane took her hand off Vivian's knee and folded both hands in her lap, composed, patient, a woman who had all night. Your mother married for feeling, and she left you nothing but a drawer full of costume jewelry and a father who can't finish a sentence. I married for sense, and look which of us has a house. You married my father when he was too tired to say no. It was the first hard thing Molly had said, and it dropped into the room like a plate breaking. Vivian's head came up, Walter's did too, and Diane, for one instant, went perfectly still, the stillness of a woman recalculating, and then she smiled, and the smile was the most frightening thing in the room, because it meant she had found the fight interesting. "There she is," Diane said softly. "There's the girl who won't take it back at dinner. Good, then take this back with the same spine." She leaned forward. "End it. Give him to Vivian. Do it before New Year's, so that when he walks into this house, he walks in as her guest, and not your embarrassment. Do that, and you'll have done one useful thing for the people who raised you." "You didn't raise me. I fed you. You counted what you fed me." Diane's smile held, but something behind it cooled. "You think refusing me makes you noble. It makes you selfish. There is a difference between the two that you have never once been able to see." She gestured, a small flick of the fingers, taking in the room, the lamp, the cold fireplace, the pearls, all of it. "A selfish woman keeps a man she can't hold on to, just so no one else can have him. A useful woman looks at what's in front of her and gives the family the win. I'm asking you to be useful, once, and you're standing there with your little bag deciding you'd rather feel righteous." Molly looked at Vivian then, directly, for the first time. "Do you want this?" Molly said. Vivian's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Her hand was white around the phone. "She wants what's good for her," Diane answered. "I asked her. And I answered, because she's smart enough to let me." Diane's voice sharpened for the first time, a thin edge under the warmth. Vivian understands the offer. Vivian understands that a man like that doesn't come twice. Don't turn to her looking for an ally. She was raised to know better than you. But Vivian would not lift her eyes. And in the not lifting, Molly saw the whole architecture of the thing, how it had been built for years, the tutor and the piano and the summer camps, all of it aimed at this one moment, this handoff, this arrangement of the pretty daughter in front of the money. And she saw that Vivian, who had wanted the man out of vanity, had not wanted to be told she was a chess piece any more than Molly wanted to be one. "He knows me," Molly said. She was not sure who she was saying it to. "He knows what I sound like when I lie. I've watched him watch other people lie." "Then don't lie," Diane said. "Tell him the truth. Tell him a maid isn't a wife. You don't know what he thinks a wife is. I know what men like him think. I've spent my life among the edges of it." Diane stood again, smoothing her slacks, unhurried, the way she did everything. And the standing was a kind of closing of the subject. "You have until New Year's. That's more than fair. You end it cleanly. You introduce your sister, and this family walks into the new year with something instead of a scandal. Or," she paused by the lamp, "or you keep your pride, and you keep your uniform, and you find out for yourself what I already know, that he sends you home when he's finished. And when he does, you won't have him, and you won't have us either, because I don't keep a place at my table for a girl who chose a man over her own blood." The word blood again. She used it like a card she kept turning over. Walter cleared his throat. Everyone looked at him. It was the loudest thing he had done all night. "Molly," he said. His voice was thin. "Your stepmother only wants—" "Don't." Molly did not raise her voice. She just said the word, and it stopped him as completely as Diane's hand ever had. "Not from you. Not tonight." Walter's mouth closed. His eyes went back to the rug, and Molly felt the old grief move through her, familiar as a floorboard she knew to step over. The grief of a father who reached for her only after the reaching cost nothing and changed nothing. Diane watched the exchange with satisfaction. "You see," she said gently, "even he knows I'm right. He just hasn't got the stomach to say it twice." "He hasn't got the stomach for anything," Molly said. "You made sure of that." "I gave him peace." You gave him a chair and told him to stay in it. For a moment, nobody spoke. The lamp buzzed. The clock in the hall marked the hour with a single soft note, and Molly counted it without meaning to, the way she counted everything. Diane came toward her then, slowly, until she was close enough that Molly could smell the powder and the faint sweetness of the sherry she took after dinner. Up close, her face was all angles, the tight jaw, the thin lips, the pale eyes that had learned long ago to show nothing they didn't choose to show. I'm going to say this once, quietly, so you understand it's not a threat, it's a fact, Diane said. You are 29 years old. You have no savings, because you send half of what he pays you to a father who won't look at you. You have no husband and no prospect of one except this, which isn't yours, it's a loan he'll call back. You have a drawer with a dead woman's ring in it, and a bag you packed like you had somewhere to go. She tilted her head. You don't. This is the only family you have, and I am offering you a way to stay inside it, instead of watching it from the cold. All you have to do is be reasonable. Give the man to the daughter who fits him, and keep your place here. Molly held the strap. She thought about the blue room and the 9 hours of sleep. She thought about a man in a kitchen offering a second cup without turning around. She thought about the word he'd said in Korean that she hadn't asked him to translate, and how she'd known anyway, the way you know weather. You called 2 people today to find out what he's worth, Molly said. Did you ever, in 18 years, call 1 person to find out what I'm worth? Diane's expression did not change. You're worth exactly what you can do for this family. Right now, that's one thing. Do it. Molly picked up the bag. She lifted it slowly, deliberately, and settled the strap on her shoulder, and the deliberateness was the loudest thing she could do without saying a word. Vivian watched her from the sofa. Walter watched the rug. Diane watched Molly's face, hunting it for the give, for the flicker that meant the argument had landed and would keep working overnight, the way her arguments always did, in the dark, when there was no one to hold the line but the girl who never had. Well, Diane said, you'll think about it. You always do. You'll be righteous tonight, and reasonable by morning. She turned back toward the lamp, already done, already certain, reaching to lower the flame. You know where the door is. You've always known where the door is. Just be sure which side of it you want to be on when the year turns. Molly stood there with the bag on her shoulder and her mother's ring buttoned against her ribs and the whole quiet weight of the house pressing down. 18 years of it. The smaller room and the counted meals and the photographs with one face missing, and she felt the answer rising in her, the real one, the one she had never once been allowed to say at this address. Her hand found the doorknob. She had not decided yet whether she would say it, or swallow it, or carry it out into the dark unspoken, the way she had carried everything else out of this house. But her fingers closed on the cold metal, and behind her, Diane was lowering the lamp, and the room was going dim, and Molly turned her head just enough to catch her stepmother's profile in the last of the light. And she opened her mouth. No. The word landed flat in the middle of the room. Molly's hand stayed on the knob, but she didn't open the door. She turned back to face them. Diane's smile held for a second longer than it should have. No. What? No to all of it. Molly let the bag slide off her shoulder and set it on the floor by her foot. Not a surrender, a placement. I'm not breaking up with him. I'm not handing him to Vivian. I'm not walking him through that door on New Year's like a gift, with her name on the tag. The lamp buzzed faintly in the quiet. Diane crossed to the sideboard and poured a finger of sherry, unhurried, as if the answer needed time to embarrass itself. You're tired. You drove twice tonight. Sleep on it. I don't need to sleep on it. You will. I won't. Molly's voice didn't rise. That was the strange part. The part Diane noticed first. The girl who used to press her thumbnail into her own skin to keep from crying wasn't pressing anything now. Her hands hung open at her sides. Vivian shifted on the sofa. She still had the phone face down against her knee. and her thumb moved along its edge like she was scrolling something that wasn't there. "This is embarrassing," she said, to the room, to no one. "Then leave," Molly said. Vivian's head came up. "Excuse me? You've been sitting there for an hour, like this is happening to you. It isn't." Molly took one step off the door. "None of this is happening to you. You just want to be in the picture when it does." Diane set the glass down without drinking. "Careful." "Why?" Molly looked at her. "What happens if I'm not careful? You don't keep a chair for me anyway. You said it yourself." Something changed in Diane's face. A small tightening at the corners of the mouth. The pursed lines going deeper. She was recalculating again. Molly had watched her do it at the dinner table 3 weeks ago when the word rich entered the conversation, and she watched her do it now. Faster, colder. "You think this is strength," Diane said, "standing at my door with a bag of laundry, telling me no. Let me tell you what it is." She came around the sofa, unhurried, and stopped an arm's length away. "It's a tantrum with better posture." Molly held the look. "Maybe. A man like that doesn't marry the girl who scrubs his tile. He gets bored, and when he's bored, he'll be generous. A car, a check, a nice word to whoever he hands you off to. And you'll come back here with nothing, and I will be exactly where I am now, and you'll be older." Diane tilted her head. "I'm offering you the only version of this where you don't lose. Vivian takes the front of it. You keep your dignity in the back. Everyone wins. Everyone but me." "You were never in the running, Molly. That's what you can't hear." The clock on the mantel ticked. Walter's chair creaked as he shifted his weight, and every head in the room turned a fraction toward him, the reflex of 18 years, waiting for the man to say the thing that would settle it. He didn't. Molly turned fully to her father. He was looking at the dead fireplace again, hands folded in his lap, glasses catching the low lamplight so she couldn't quite see his eyes. "Dad." Walter's jaw worked. "Molly, I'm not asking you to fight her." Her voice softened, and that was worse somehow than if she'd shouted. "I'm asking you to say one true thing, in front of everyone, just once." The room waited. Diane picked her glass back up, patient, sure of the outcome. She'd been sure of Walter for 18 years, and he had never once made her wrong. "Your stepmother," Walter began, and stopped. He took his glasses off, cleaned them on the hem of his cardigan, the brown one, the one he'd worn to every dinner Molly could remember. Put them back on. "Your stepmother has kept this family together. That's not nothing. You don't know what it was like after your mother." "I was there," Molly said. "I know exactly what it was like." He flinched. "I know she moved into the house 6 months after we buried Mom. I know she took Mom's photos off the stairs and put them in a box in the garage, the box that says winter, and I know you carried the box out yourself, because she asked you nicely." Molly's breath stayed level. "I was 11. I watched you do it. I didn't say anything because you looked so tired. I've been not saying things because you look tired for 18 years. Molly." Diane's voice, a warning. Molly didn't turn to her. She kept her eyes on her father. "Say I'm worth keeping," she said. "That's all. Not that she's wrong. Not that she's right. Just that I'm your daughter and I'm worth keeping. You can say it quietly. You can say it to your shoes. I'll take it however you can give it." Walter opened his mouth. The clock ticked. He closed it. His hands came together in his lap, one thumb rubbing the other knuckle, and he looked down at them like they belonged to someone else. Molly nodded, slowly, the way you nod when a doctor confirms the thing you already drove there knowing. "Okay," she said. "Molly? No. It's okay." And now something did move in her voice. But it wasn't a break. It was the opposite of a break. It was a door closing so gently you almost missed the latch. "I used to think you were weak, all those years. I thought, he can't help it, he's just soft, Diane's louder than him, it's not his fault." She picked the bag back up, and this time, She put the strap over her shoulder and settled it, deliberate, the way you shoulder something you intend to carry a long way. But that's not it. You made a choice. Every single time she took something from me, you had a chance to stand up, and you sat down, and you called it keeping the peace. That's not weakness, Dad. That's a decision. You just make it slower than she does. The word landed in the room and stayed there. Diane's glass paused halfway to her lips. I'm not going to keep calling it a wound, Molly said. It's not a wound. A wound doesn't decide. You decided. You've been deciding against me at every dinner in this house since I was 11, and tonight, I finally stopped waiting for the one where you don't. Walter's face had gone gray. That's not fair. No, Molly agreed. It isn't. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Vivian laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. The laugh of someone who has decided the only way to survive the room is to make it smaller. God, listen to her. She stood up off the sofa, phone finally in her hand, and pushed her hair back over one shoulder. You're giving speeches. In the living room. Over a man you've known. What? Professionally? Her mouth curved. You do realize he's not going to pick the maid. You know that, right? You've watched enough of those dramas. He's going to walk into that party, and he's going to see me, and... Say it, Molly said. Vivian blinked. What? You've been circling it all night. Say it out loud. You'll take him yourself. Molly's gaze was steady, almost kind, which took the ground out from under the younger woman more than any shout could have. Go on. I want to hear how it sounds in your voice instead of hers. Color climbed up Vivian's throat. Diane had said it for her, 3 weeks ago and again tonight, but Diane saying it was strategy, Vivian saying it would be need, and everyone in the room would hear the difference. I could, Vivian said, too fast. If I wanted to, I could take him in an afternoon. Then take him. Molly almost smiled. But you have to actually want him, Vivian. Not the party, not the cars in the driveway, not the look on your mother's face when he calls you the suitable one. Him, and you don't. You've never wanted a single thing in your life that you'd have to be alone with when the guests go home. Vivian's hand tightened on the phone. You don't know anything about me. I made your bed for 2 summers when Diane's cleaner quit, Molly said. I know exactly how you sleep. Vivian's mouth opened and shut. She looked to her mother the way she'd looked to her mother at every hard moment of her 24 years. And for once, Diane wasn't looking back at her. Diane was looking at Molly, reading her the way she'd read the numbers over the phone that afternoon, trying to find the price. Sit down, Vivian, Diane said, without turning her head. Vivian sat. She sat fast, and hated that she sat, and the color in her face went from anger to something closer to shame. She put the phone in her lap and stared at the dark screen. She had wanted the man. She had wanted the driveway full of cars and the whole town knowing. She had not wanted to be told, in front of everyone, that she couldn't hold a thing once the guests went home. That part was true, and she knew it was true, and knowing it made her smaller in the sofa. The silence after that had a different quality. Diane set her glass down for the last time. Enough. She said it quietly, and the quiet was the dangerous part. You've had your night. You've said your things. Tomorrow you'll wake up and remember that everything you have runs through this house. The money you send your father. The room upstairs that's still yours. This family. All of it is a thing I let you keep, Molly. And I have been very patient about letting you keep it while you play house with a Korean gangster who thinks you're a novelty. She stepped closer. So, here's the last version I'll offer. Break it off. Bring him to Vivian. And I'll pretend tonight didn't happen. Refuse, and you can take your bag, and your dead mother's ring, and whatever speech you have left, and you can go be his secret, in the back of that big house, until he's done with you. And when he's done, because he will be done, do not come knocking on this door. There won't be a chair. Molly looked at her for a long moment. She thought about the ring in the buttoned pocket of the bag on her shoulder, wrapped in its square of handkerchief, the one thing in this house that had ever been hers without a condition attached. Her mother had married for feeling and left a drawer of costume jewelry and a husband who couldn't finish a sentence. Diane had said that tonight, like it was the end of an argument. Standing here now, Molly understood it was the opposite. Her mother had left her the only thing in the room worth leaving with. "You keep saying he'll get tired of me," Molly said. "You've said it 3 ways in an hour. A car, a check, a cab with a reference letter." She shifted the strap higher. "You know how I know you're wrong? Because it's the only thing you can imagine a rich man doing with a woman who cleans his floors. You've never once thought about what it means that in 4 years he never did it. That should have told you something. It told me everything." Diane's jaw tightened. "There was never a chair," Molly said. "You just kept letting me stand near the table so I'd keep paying for the food." She turned to the door. "Molly," Walter's voice cracked from the chair. "Where are you going to go?" She stopped with her hand on the knob. She didn't turn around this time. Behind her she could feel the 3 of them. Diane rigid by the sideboard, Vivian frozen with the phone in her fist, her father half risen from the chair and not fully up, caught in the exact posture he'd lived his whole life in, halfway to standing. "Somewhere they opened the front door for me," she said. She opened the door. The cold came in around her ankles, out past the porch. The driveway was dark, her car where she'd left it, the neighbors' lights off, the whole quiet street asleep. She stepped out and pulled the door shut behind her. Not a slam, just a click. The same gentle latch she'd given her own decision minutes before, and the sound of it seemed louder than a slam would have been. She stood on the porch for 1 breath. 2. The porch where she'd read his text 3 weeks ago, the same cold biting the same way. Then she went down the steps and got in the car and sat with her hands on the wheel, not starting it yet. Her phone was in the cup holder. She picked it up. No new message. She'd left him at 4 o'clock heading out to something in Korean, and she didn't know if he was back. Didn't know if he was still out in whatever the night had been for him. Didn't know anything except the shape of the house behind her, getting smaller in the mirror the second she pulled away. She typed with 1 thumb. "Left them. Coming to you." She looked at it. "Deleted coming to you. Left them." She sent, and put the phone back in the cup holder, because he didn't need the second sentence to know what the first one meant. Then she started the car. The dashboard glowed. 12 degrees outside, the little readout said. She turned the heat on and didn't feel it. She backed out of the driveway slow, headlights sweeping across the front of the house, across the window where she could still see them, 3 figures who hadn't moved, arranged around a room they thought was the whole world. The phone buzzed once against the cup holder before she reached the end of the street. She didn't look at it until the stop sign, red light on her face in the dark. She turned the screen up. Gates open. 2 words, no punctuation, the way he always wrote. She read it twice, the way she'd read the note in the envelope, the way she read everything that mattered, and then she set the phone down and put both hands back on the wheel. She drove toward the open gate. Behind her, in the house with the 4 silver candlesticks, and the box in the garage marked winter, and the chair that had never been hers, the lamp still burned in the front window. Walter was standing now, all the way up, finally, too late, the way he did everything, with his hand pressed flat against the cold glass, watching 2 red taillights get smaller, and then turn, and then be gone. He said something. Nobody in the room answered him. Molly didn't see it. She was already 3 blocks gone, driving toward a house where the porch light was on, and the gate stood open, and a man she'd told everything to was waiting somewhere inside. And for the first time in 18 years, she wasn't rehearsing what she'd say when she got there. She'd already said it. She'd said all of it in the one room where it counted, and the saying of it sat in her chest not like a weight, but like something set down. The heater finally caught, warm air across her hands. She turned onto his road. The trees closed over the car. And at the end of it, past the dark hedges, the gate stood open exactly the way he'd said. Not the service entrance she'd used for 4 years, not the side path to the back door, but the main gate, wide, waiting, the one she'd never once been allowed to drive through. She drove through it and didn't slow down. The blue room's lamp was still on when she came up the stairs. Min-jae had left it that way, one small light in a house full of dark windows, and Molly stopped in the doorway with the canvas bag still on her shoulder and looked at it like it might be a trick. It wasn't. He was in the hall behind her a moment later, in his shirt with the collar open, no shoes. He had heard the car. He always heard the car. "You kept the bag on," he said. "I didn't know where to put it." He took it off her shoulder. He didn't ask what was in it. He set it down inside the door of the blue room, upright, the way a man sets down something he intends to give back, and then he stood there and waited, because that was the thing about him. He could wait longer than anyone she had ever met. She sat on the edge of the bed. Her hands were cold. She pressed them flat between her knees. "They wanted me to give you to Vivian," she said. The words came out smaller than they had felt in the car. In the car, they had been enormous. Here, said out loud to the man himself, they sounded almost stupid, like something a child reports at a dinner table, and she watched his face for the flinch, for the recalculation, for the tiny motion behind the eyes that every other person made when they learned how the Davidsons had priced him. Nothing moved. "Say that again," he said, not sharp, level. "My stepmother, she told me to end it, to hand you to Vivian before New Year's, so you'd walk into that house as Vivian's guest instead of my embarrassment." Her throat did something. She pushed through it. She said, "Vivian was made for a room like the one you'd bring, raised for it, tutors and piano and summer camps, and I was the one who cleans the room." He crossed to the chair by the window and sat, forearms on his knees, and he looked at her, and he said nothing at all. So she kept going. She hadn't planned to. The plan, if there had been a plan, was to say the fact and let him carry it. But his silence had a floor under it, and she found she could stand on the floor and keep talking, and once she started, she couldn't find the edge of it. She told him about the 11-year-old, about the funeral where she'd worn a dress that was already too short because no one had time to buy her a new one, and how 6 months later, there was a woman at the head of the table lighting 4 candles that had belonged to someone else's mother. She told him about the box marked Winter, about the staircase where her mother's photographs used to hang, and where, one Tuesday, they simply were not, and how she had gone up and down those stairs for a year, looking at the pale rectangles on the wallpaper where the frames had been. She told him about the smaller room, about sending half of what he paid her back to a father who spent it, and never once asked if she had enough left, about standing near the table for 18 years and being allowed to stand there as long as she kept paying for the food. She heard her own voice climb and thin. She stopped it. Min-jae had not moved from the chair. His hands were folded, his eyes were on her, dark and open and completely still, and he had not said one word since, "Say that again," and the longer he stayed like that, the more certain she became that she had made a mistake. Because this was the moment, wasn't it? This was where a man decided whether the woman who cleaned his floors was worth the war she'd just described. She had handed him the whole ledger, the dead mother, the empty savings, the stepmother who'd researched his net worth in an afternoon, the sister who'd said she could take him in one. She had shown him exactly how little she came with and exactly how much noise she came attached to. A reasonable man would be quiet like this while he found the kind sentence, the sentence that started with "I think" and ended with "too much." "You're doing it again," Min-jae said. She blinked. "Doing what?" "Deciding what I think. before I say it. He leaned back. You did it 4 years ago in the hallway. You decided I'd fire you for touching my mail, so you left the note under the lamp instead of handing it to me. You were wrong then, too. This isn't mail. No. He looked at the bag by the door. It's worse. You think this is the part where I get tired. She didn't answer, which was an answer. He stood. He went to the window and looked out at the dark shape of the garden, and for a moment she thought he would finally say the thing, and her whole body braced for it. The shoulders, the jaw, the breath she held so she wouldn't make a sound when it landed. I need to make a call, he said. That was all. He touched the doorframe on his way out, 2 fingers, the way he touched things when he was thinking, and then he was gone, down the hall, and she heard his voice a minute later, low, in Korean, a door closing on it. She sat in the blue room with the lamp on and read the closed door the way she'd read every closed door in her life. She had told him everything, and he had listened, and then he had gotten up to make a phone call. Men who were staying did not need to leave the room. Men who were staying said something first. She lay back on top of the covers without getting under them. She kept her shoes on. If you keep your shoes on, she thought, you can be up and gone before anyone has to ask you to be. Vivian found him the way she found most things she wanted, by looking up an address and arriving without warning, in the champagne coat, with her chin already tilted for the version of the evening she'd rehearsed on the drive. It was not the New Year. It was a Wednesday, 2 days after Molly had left. Vivian had told Diane she was going to a friend's. She had not told Diane the rest, because the rest was hers, the one thing in the whole arrangement that could be hers alone if she was quick. And Vivian had always understood that the fastest way to win a competition was to end it before the other girl knew it had started. The gate was open. She took that as permission. It was not. A man in a dark suit met her on the gravel before she reached the door. Not the boss, someone the size of a door himself, and he did not ask her name. He said, "He's expecting a delivery. You're not it," and he waited, hands loose, until she said who she was, and even then, his face did nothing, and she felt the first small crack in the evening she'd built. Min Jae came out onto the step. He did not come down it. "You're the sister," he said. Vivian smiled the smile that worked. "Vivian, we haven't properly met. I thought, since you'll be at our New Year's, we might—" "Why is the gate open?" he said, not to her, to the man on the gravel. The man went to close it. She kept the smile up through the sound of the gate rolling shut behind her, which was harder than it should have been. "I wanted to introduce myself," she said. "Before the party, Molly can be— she doesn't always show people the best side of a situation. I thought you might like to know there's more to our family than one bad dinner." He looked at her the way a man looks at a chair someone has left in a doorway, not unkind, just measuring how to get past it. "You drove here," he said, "to tell me you're the better one." "That's not." The smile slipped a half-inch. "I'm saying you have options, that's all. Options a man in your position might want to consider before he ties himself to someone who saw the man with the gold watch," Min Jae said. Vivian stopped. "You don't know that story," he said. "You don't know 6 of them. She never told you, because you were never someone she'd tell." He said it without heat. That was the part that reached her. There was no fight in it, no jealousy for her to work against, nothing she could flirt or wound or negotiate. "You came to a house you've never been to, through a gate you weren't asked through, to offer me a trade she already refused to make. There's nothing here you can take. She isn't a thing I have. You've all made that same mistake." "She's the help," Vivian said, and heard how it sounded the instant it was out, thin and mean, and 2 days too late. "She's the reason I'm not in prison, or dead, or poorer," he said. "You're the daughter who was raised for a room. She's the one who noticed who was standing in it." He turned to go back inside. "Drive safe, it's dark." The phrase landed on Vivian without weight. She had no way to know it was her father's, the only sentence Walter Davidson could ever finish, handed back to her now from a stranger's mouth, like a coin returned because it wasn't worth keeping. She stood on the gravel while the door closed, in a coat that had cost more than the man on the gravel made in a week, and for the first time in her life she could not find the angle. There wasn't one. He had not been available to lose. He had never been on the board at all. She got back in her car. She sat with her hands on the wheel. Then she drove back down the closed drive, and the man opened the gate exactly wide enough to let her out, and not 1 inch as an invitation to return. Molly heard the second car and thought, for one lurching moment, that it was for her, that Diane had come, or that Min Jae had called someone to take her home. The delivery she was no longer the point of. She went to the window of the blue room. She saw taillights going away, not coming. She saw nothing else. She did not know who it had been. She would not know for weeks. She lay back down. Min Jae came back near 2 in the morning. She was awake. She had been awake the whole time, on top of the covers, shoes on, listening to the house the way she'd listened to it for 4 years, for footsteps, for the tell of a mood, for the moment she'd be needed or dismissed. He knocked. He had never knocked on a door in this house. It was his house. "You're on top of the blankets," he said, from the doorway. "I wasn't tired. You have your shoes on." She looked at them. She didn't have a good answer, and he was a man who noticed when you didn't have one, so she gave him the true one instead. In case. In case of what? In case you'd changed your mind, and it was easier to be already dressed for it. He came in and sat on the end of the bed, near her feet, and he was quiet again. And this time, she made herself hold the quiet instead of filling it, because she had filled it once tonight with her whole childhood, and it hadn't bought her anything she could see. "When you talk," he said finally, "I stop talking. That's not the same as leaving. It feels the same, from this side. I know how it feels from your side. You told me, 18 years of a man at a table who chose the peace over you every single time you needed a word." He said it back to her almost exactly, the way she'd said it in the car of her own head, and she realized he'd been keeping every piece of it, filing it, while she was reading his face for the exit. "So when I go quiet, you hear him. I understand that, but I'm not deciding whether you're worth it. I decided that a long time ago, in a hallway, with a broken umbrella and a reference letter. Then say something. When I'm falling apart, say one thing." He thought about it. He was a man who answered questions after he'd actually answered them, and she had learned to wait through the gap. "I don't have the word," he said. "There's one in Korean. There isn't one in English. I've been looking for it since Sunday." He almost smiled. "When I have it, I'll say it. Until then, I'd rather be quiet next to you than loud and wrong." It should have been enough. Part of her knew it was, in fact, more than anyone had ever offered her across a dark room. But the 11-year-old on the stairs had learned a lesson deeper than any sentence could reach. And the lesson was this: the ones who go quiet are practicing the goodbye. She had watched her father go quiet for 18 years, and every silence had been a small abandonment, wearing a calm face. "I'm going to close my eyes," she said. "You don't have to stay. I know I don't have to." He stayed. He didn't touch her. He sat at the end of the bed with his back against the footboard and his eyes open in the dark, and at some point she stopped listening for the door and started listening for his breathing, and somewhere in there she went under. She woke once, near dawn. He was still there. His head had tipped back against the wall, and his eyes were closed, and his hands were folded on his knee. And she looked at him for a long time in the gray light and could not decide whether a man who fell asleep guarding a door was staying or just too tired to leave. She got up without waking him. She stood by the window. Outside, the gravel where a champagne coat had stood 2 nights before was empty and pale, and she knew nothing about it, and the not knowing sat in her chest next to the older not knowing, the 18-year-old habit of assuming the worst so the worst could never surprise her. On the dresser, the canvas bag. She had not unpacked it. A week of clothes, folded. And in the buttoned pocket, wrapped in a square of handkerchief, her mother's ring, the one thing in her life that had never come with a condition attached, and the one thing she could not make herself take out and put on, because to put it on in this house would be to believe something she did not yet dare to believe. She left it in the pocket. She pressed the button twice, the way she always did, checking it was closed. Behind her, Min-jae slept against the footboard, guarding a door no one had come through, and Molly stood at the window in her shoes, dressed for a leaving that no one in the house intended, more alone in that quiet than she had been in the loud house she'd fled, because at least there she'd known what the silence meant. Here, she had no idea, and that, for a woman who had survived by always knowing, was the bottom of it. The Davidsons' driveway had room for 6 cars, and by 9 o'clock on New Year's Eve it held 11, wedged nose to tail down the length of the street. Molly counted them from the passenger seat of a car she had never sat in the front of. Min-jae drove with one hand. She wore plain clothes, a soft gray sweater, plain slacks, the same things she owned in October. She had not asked what to wear. He had not told her. "You didn't have to come with me," she said. "I know." He turned the car onto the gravel apron below the house. 2 other vehicles rolled in behind them, long and dark, and stopped where he stopped. She glanced at the mirror. "Who are they?" "Men who work for me." He put the car in park. "They stay outside." The windows of the house were gold. Through the largest one, she could see the party arranged like a photograph. The deep green of Diane's dress, the champagne shimmer of Vivian moving between guests with a tray she didn't need to carry, carrying it anyway because it made her look gracious. Walter stood near the mantel in a suit that fit him wrong. Nobody had noticed the cars yet. Molly's hand went to the door. "Wait," Min-jae said. He reached across her, opened the glove box, and took nothing out of it. He just wanted the second, she understood later. He wanted to sit with her one more second before the room started. "You don't hand anyone anything tonight," he said. "You understand? Not a coat, not a drink, not me. I never planned to hand you over. I know that too." He got out. He came around the front of the car in the cold and opened her door. And he did it the way he had done it once before, at his own house, the way that still made her stomach turn over. She stepped out onto the gravel of the house she'd grown up small in, and for once, she was not walking toward the side entrance. They went up the front steps together. The bell was for guests. She had rung it maybe twice in her life. Min-jae pressed it and stepped back, and they waited like people who had been invited, which, technically, weeks ago, at a dinner table, they had been. Vivian opened the door. The tray was still in her hand. She looked at Molly first, and there was a half-second where her face arranged a small cruelty, a line about the sweater maybe, or the plain slacks. Then she looked to the left, at the man standing one step down, and the line died on her mouth before it reached sound. "You," she said. "Good evening," Min-jae said. Behind Vivian, the party kept going for another moment. A laugh, the clink of glass, a woman saying something about the roads. Then a few heads turned toward the open door and the cold coming in, and the room began to notice him, the way a room notices the one thing in it that doesn't belong to the price bracket of everything else. Diane crossed the floor fast. "Molly!" She said the name like a correction. Her eyes were already past her daughter, already on the guest, doing the math Molly had watched her do at the dinner table weeks ago, converting him back into an asset. "You came, and you brought." The smile switched on. "You must be Mr. Kang. We've heard so." "Who decided," Min-jae said, "that she was going to give me to your other daughter?" The room heard it. Not all of it. Enough. Diane's smile held its shape for one more breath and then set. like something cooling. I'm sorry? You told her to end it. He didn't raise his voice. He never raised his voice. You told her to hand me across this room to a woman I have met one time, in my own driveway, when she came without an invitation, and I sent her home. He let that sit. Near the mantel, a glass stopped halfway to a mouth. You made a plan for me. I want to know who decided I was part of it. Vivian had gone the color of the wall. The tray dipped in her hand. Somewhere behind her, a guest murmured, "What did he say?" And another shushed them, because the whole point of the shush was to hear the next part. Diane recovered the way she always recovered, by taking the highest chair in the room and sitting in it. "I think," she said, "there's been a misunderstanding, and I think it would be better discussed." "There's no misunderstanding." He turned his head, found Molly, and put out his hand. Not for her to shake, palm up, open. Molly, she looked at the hand. 4 years she had walked into rooms and made herself the smallest true thing in them. 4 years of the side door. She had taught her own body how to occupy less. And here was a hand held out at the exact center of the one room built to prove she didn't count. And every person she had ever wanted to matter to was watching to see whether she would take it. She took it. His fingers closed over hers. He drew her half a step forward, not behind him, beside him, and he turned them both to face the room together. "This is my girlfriend," he said. "Not the woman who works for me. Not a job." The word landed in the gold room and did not break anything, and that was somehow louder than if it had. Molly felt it go through her chest and out her back. 2 words. He had spent, he'd told her once, since a Sunday, looking for a word in his own language for a feeling he couldn't fit into English. He hadn't found it, so he'd used the smallest, plainest English one there was, and made it enormous by saying it here. Diane's mouth opened. "I decided a long time ago," Min-jae said, before a sound could come out of it. In a hallway. She was holding a rag. "She told me not to trust a man who smiled too much, and 3 weeks later I found out where my money was going." He wasn't looking at Diane anymore. He was looking at Molly, but he was talking loud enough for the mantel and the coat rack and the caterers frozen in the kitchen doorway. "You thought my silence about her was doubt. So did she. It wasn't. Silence is a thing I decide. I decided her 4 years ago, and I've been slow saying it. And that's on me, not on her." Vivian set the tray down on the hall table, because her hand wasn't going to hold it. "You could have said," she started, and stopped, because there was no end to the sentence that didn't shame her. "You could have said, when I drove out there." Everyone in the room now understood, without being told the details, that Vivian had driven out there. The color climbed to the roots of her hair. Molly watched her stepsister realize, publicly, in a dress the price of a used car, that she had never once been on the board, that the game had a table she'd never been seated at. Diane made her last move. Molly, quiet now, reasonable, the voice she used when she'd decided to win by seeming to lose gracefully. "This is lovely." "It is. But you understand, this is a private family matter, and Mr. Kang can't possibly." "He asked you a question," Molly said. The room turned to her, her own voice, steady. "You asked me to hand him to Vivian before tonight," Molly said, "so he'd walk in as her guest and not my embarrassment. He walked in as neither. He walked in as mine." She didn't look at her father. "Not yet. You spent one afternoon on 2 phone calls finding out what he was worth. You never once found out what I was." Walter had come off the mantel. He stood in the middle of his own living room in his badly fitting suit, and his hands were doing the thing his hands did, turning nothing over. His mouth worked. For 1 second Molly thought he might, finally, at 61, in front of 11 cars worth of guests, say the true thing. He said, "Molly, please, not here." "Not here," she repeated. She almost smiled. "You've been saying, not here." My whole life. There was never going to be a here for you. That's all right. I stopped waiting for it in the car. And that was the last thing she needed from him, which was nothing. Min-jae's thumb moved once across the back of her hand. A signal, small, private. Ready when you are. But he wasn't finished, and she felt him not be finished, felt him gather the room one more time. She's not coming back here, he said. I know that's not what any of you were worried about, so let me tell you what you should be worried about. He let go of Molly's hand, but only to reach into his coat, and every person in the room flinched at the motion, because of what he was, and what they'd read, and what he took out was a folded sheet of paper. He held it up. He didn't hand it to anyone. In 4 years, she saved my business 6 times, not by working for me, by seeing. A chair moved wrong, a man whose hands didn't match his mouth, a note under a lamp. Things the people I pay to notice did not notice. He unfolded the paper one crease. On Monday, she takes a management stake in one of my companies, a real one. Legal, filed, her name on it. Not because she's mine. He glanced at Diane. Because she's the best read on a room I have ever had, and I would be a fool to keep letting the woman who saw the trap wear an apron while she did it. Nobody spoke. The party had become an audience, and the audience had stopped pretending it wasn't one. A man near the window had his phone half out and thought better of it. You had her cleaning your stairs, Min-jae said, to Diane, to Walter, to the whole assembled room of people who came every year to eat the food Molly's half-salary had helped keep on the table. For 18 years you had a woman who could look at a room and tell you which smile was going to cost you everything, and you used her to fold your laundry, and you told her she was lucky to stand near the table. He folded the paper back up and put it away. I'm going to marry her, if she'll have me. I haven't asked yet. I'm asking her, not you, and not tonight, and not in this room, but I wanted every person here to hear that the girl you told to hand me over is the reason I'm still standing to be handed. Diane's pearls sat at her throat like they were choking her a little. She had one card, and she played it because she was Diane, and she'd never in her life sat down while holding a card. And when he tires of you, she said, low, meant only for Molly. But the room was too quiet now. When the new wears off, where will you go then? Not this door. That's the part you never understood, Molly said. I was never trying to keep a door in this house. I was trying to find one house where somebody opened it for me before I knocked. She looked at Min-jae. I found it. The gate at his own house, the front gate, the one she'd never been allowed to use in 4 years, standing open the night she'd left them, and open every night since. Vivian was crying, quietly, in the way of a person crying about themselves, and not wanting anyone to name it. Nobody named it. Walter had sat down in the chair by the cold fireplace, the same chair, and he was looking at his daughter with an expression Molly had waited her whole childhood to see, and now felt nothing about, which was its own kind of ending. We're going, Min-jae said to her. Not an order. A door held open. Molly turned toward it. She stopped once, at the wall by the stairs, where the pale rectangles had been for 18 years, the ghosts of the frames of a woman nobody in this house would say the name of. Molly reached into the inside pocket of her bag, the one with the button, and she didn't take the ring out. She just pressed her thumb against the cloth-wrapped shape of it, once, the way she'd pressed the button twice, for years, to make sure a thing was still hers. Then she took it out. Her mother's ring. Cloth square, thin gold, the small stone gone slightly dull. She hadn't been able to put it on in a house where wearing it would mean believing in something. She wasn't in that house anymore. She slid it onto her finger in the front hall of the Davidsons, in front of all of them, and it fit the way it had always been going to fit, and she closed her hand. Good night, she said, to the room, to none of them. Min-jae opened the front door. The cold came in, and the gold light spilled out onto the steps, where the guests' expensive cars sat cooling, and the two of them walked down together, past the men who worked for him and stayed outside, to a car she now sat in the front of. Behind them, the party did not restart. It stood in its gold window and watched the taillights find the street. And for the first time in 18 years, the house on the hill was the smaller thing, and knew it. Molly looked at the ring on her hand in the light of the dashboard. 12 degrees, the readout said, the same as the night she'd left. She didn't feel it. You said you hadn't found the word, she said. The Korean one, for the feeling. Min Jae pulled onto the road toward his gate. The open one, the one that was hers now too. I stopped looking, he said. I used yours. Which one? Girlfriend. He almost smiled, the way he almost did, for now. She turned the ring once around her finger and watched the dark road open in front of the headlights, going forward, only forward, toward a house where the front door was already unlocked and the lamp in the blue room was already lit, left burning by a man who had decided, a long time ago, in a hallway, with a broken umbrella and a letter of reference, that she was the one thing under that roof he would keep the light on for. She let the seat hold her weight. For the first time in her life, she didn't sit near the table. She was going home to one. If you want to watch all the stories without any ads and also get access to bonus scenes, extended epilogues, and exclusive spicy chapters, head over to our Patreon. Scan the QR code on the screen. The link is in the description or in the pinned comment. See you there. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever loved someone your own family called beneath them and kept your head high anyway? Have you noticed the quiet things nobody else saw while they treated you like part of the furniture? And when someone chose silence in the moment you needed defending, did you finally name it for what it was? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, loyalty, and karma, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel